Welcome to the Moynihan Report here on the 2A Network. I am your host, Michael Moynihan. Today, we got a great one. We got a barn burner. My very old friend, the person who actually got me into journalism in a way, actually, the first
American journalism.
American journalism. I was writing in Sweden, and Nick Gillespie, currently the editor-at-large at Reason, allowed me to write in Reason back in 2004 or 5 or something.
Sounds about right.
And you can see Nick's work everywhere. Right. But specifically, you should watch Nick's interview show. It's The Reason Interview with Nick Gillespie. It's one of my favorite shows. I think it's fantastic. You do a great, amazing array of guests. It's not just a bunch of crusty old libertarians.
Yeah.
But
or a crusty new one.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. They come on. But I wanted to start with something that just happened today. Okay. Be topical today. Elon Musk.
Yeah.
He of Doge fame. Well, I think his fame is a little broader than Doge. Has been taking some pot shots at Trump.
Yeah.
And then he did something, and this is the tweet today. Time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. Mark this post for the future. This is a follow-up. The truth will come out. Yeah. I think, I'm just going to say this, this is the greatest political troll of my lifetime. It is so brilliantly executed because he knows it's not true. There are no Epstein files. This whole thing is a confection, and it's the brains of all these crazy people. But to get the MAGA base, to tell them the call is coming from inside the house, to tell them like you've been on the side of this guy, he's in the files, and he's not getting, because they've been saying this, they're not releasing the files, they're not, which makes no sense. But how brilliant is that to get everyone? And you see people responding like, "Oh, geez." Maybe MAGA's been a lie.
I'm just worried for Cat Turd.
He's
have this is going to be like an intestinal blockage.
Well, I have to be more precise than you, Nick. I'm worried for Cat Turd 2.
Yeah, I thought there's only one Cat Turd.
But I think it's Cat Turd 2.
2 is the second account.
What is the guy on the Rogan show? What's it called?
Cat
Jamie.
Turd 2.
Jamie, can we look at it? Is it Cat Turd 2? Or Cat Turd 1?
That is the handle, but I think it's
he looks totally
I think it's Cat Turd, but it's the same Cat Turd. This is just, Cat Turd point.
Cat Turd.
But let's not get
sidetracked by Cat Turd, who I did see on the Tucker Carlson show. And he was incredibly impressive.
Yeah. Well,
he looked like a roadie for Merle Haggard, and he was just sitting in a wood cabin talking about.
Was he in full rodeo clown?
He had like a huge hat on and like a big long Billy Goat beard. Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting because we're talking today. I wanted to talk to you about this. You wrote a book back in the day. And it was kind of about the Libertarian Moment. Cato did some polling about this. Americans seemed like very libertarian. 2014, Robert Draper in the New York Times Magazine writes a piece. You feature in this piece kind of about the Libertarian Moment.
The title was, Has the Libertarian Moment Finally Arrived?
Has it finally arrived?
And I think we know the answer.
And we think we know the answer is absolutely not. But I think the funny thing about this, and why I wanted to start with Elon beyond the fact that it's kind of big news today, is that he is a crazy person. His Twitter feed has just been, an endless stream of fake stories and total bullshit. And
it's odd, he did change back from those handles like Biggest Dickus and stuff to Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. And the funny thing is there are a couple of Elon Musks.
Yeah.
Steve Bannon came out today and said he should be deported from the country. That was the last thing I saw from Bannon because he lied on something or other. But the reason Steve Bannon hated him was because, there's a lot of reasons, but I would say you could crystallize it with the fact that he used to tweet Tom Sowell videos, Milton Friedman stuff from Free to Choose. This attack on Trump is essentially a libertarian-ish attack. That's that kind of, saying that this bill is...
you're talking about his attacks on the big, beautiful bill.
That's the initial
Elon
thing,
Musk, that was stunning.
That was stunning, right?
Yeah.
But Elon Musk, weirdly, is the person who kind of represents that dying, if not totally dead, wing of the party that is a bit libertarian.
Yeah, no, and he, the first big blow up, I think, between kind of MAGA conservatives and Elon Musk came in last fall when he said, like, I'll go, the mat for H-1B visas.
Yeah.
And that was huge. And then he started telling people, like, go fuck your face. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a very elevated conversation. It was really like a missing scene from
Shut up
the
in your
musical
face.
1776, with Thomas Jefferson and John Adams singing to each other. And, so he does have certain, elements that work very well from the kind of libertarian end of the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Tom Sowell, who is, Friedman-like, and he's written, textbooks on basic economics and things like that. The biggest Tom Sowell account,
Thomas Sowell
quotes became the opposite of what Thomas Sowell believed in economics.
Yeah.
Tweeting about how amazing the tariffs are and Liberation Day,
and also increasingly tweeting videos of black crime.
Oh yeah, that's
really what Thomas Sowell is all about.
It really represents it. So, what happened over those years? I mean, tell me first why, way back then, a decade ago, that you were hopeful that America was coming around to the ideas that you've had almost your whole life.
Well, this was partly, I co-wrote the Declaration of Independence with Matt Welch, and we co-authored a piece in 2008, I think it was the end of 2008, when the financial crisis was happening, called the Libertarian Moment. And we were like, we had noticed two things. One, and the first was that the number of people who called themselves independents was at or near an all-time high. And it had been kind of steadily, like the main, the Republican and Democratic parties were just losing mind share and not market share, because everybody who's elected is one of those, but people didn't want to be associated with them. And then we looked at the birth of the Libertarian Party, which is not necessarily the biggest thing in the world, but the libertarian movement really took off in the early 70s in a profound way in response to everything that Nixon was doing, coming on the heels of everything that LBJ had done. And
which is the Great Society, wage and price controls.
Right. And, the way a lot of people talk about it, and I think there's a lot of truth to this, is that LBJ did the spending part of the Great Society, and then Nixon did the regulatory fulfillment of it. So things like OSHA, the EPA, not the FDA, but the ATF. These were all Nixon, like he created a whole bunch of regulatory apparatuses.
Yeah, and remember there was a moment for certain liberals and liberal writers and historians that if they wanted to get a little attention, like there was a woman at, I think, Montana named Joan Hoff, who wrote a book like Nixon Reconsidered. Yeah. And you're like, oh, this is going to be one of these, John Dean, not John Dean, but H.R. Haldeman's cousin or something. Yeah. And it turns out she's like a left-wing professor from a school in Montana. And looking at it through the prism of, like, I guess, big government, you could say. Yeah. I mean, and then, of course, the deregulator is Jimmy Carter. Right.
And what happened in the 70s, there were a couple of things. One is that's when lifestyles really got liberated. Everything, the feminist movement, the gay movement, the kind of swingers movement, broadly speaking, what Tom Wolfe...
Never talked about much.
Yeah, well, what Tom...
I'm glad you brought it up.
What Tom Wolfe talked about in his essay, The Third Great Awakening, or the Me Decade. And there was this flowering of real lived freedom, like cultural freedom, not without costs, but with a lot of benefits. And then by the end of the 70s, you had this deregulation in place. So we were kind of prophesying that in the darkest moment of all of the massive government intervention that was taking place because of the financial crisis, that we were kind of on the threshold of a similar era. Yeah. And, within a couple of years, you had, of that article, the original article, you had the Tea Party. You also had Occupy Wall Street. You had a broader, a more kind of vital libertarian element, self-consciously libertarian element in the Republican Party.
People the right is it fair to say that the right today, or the Republican Party today, would probably find more in common with Occupy Wall Street than they would with the Tea Party?
Oh, yeah. No, totally.
I mean, Steve Bannon told me that I said to him, when you were running Breitbart at this time, you were talking about the socialism that was going to ruin America because, we were putting money into car companies so they didn't go bust. And he said, yeah, that was wrong.
Yeah.
I wish we had bailed out all the car companies.
And we're getting closer and closer to the horseshoe being made into a ring.
Yeah.
And, Trump and Bernie Sanders don't always sound that much like or that different. Their followers do. Iowa Hawk Blog, the great Twitter handle, had a thing about how saying like the next flip in, partly based on Elon Musk's stuff, the next episode of Horseshoe Theory is going to be conservatives keying Teslas and taking videos of it, but like, yeah, we're getting there, right?
There won't be swastikas. Somebody, I was
well, there'll be sauna beds, right, or whatever. So,
The it's a very, very odd moment that I've been talking about for a long time, and we've all kind of seen this coming. But is it possible? And I don't want to say that you should write this piece or this book again.
Right.
But is it possible that there is a more libertarian moment right around the corner?
Yeah.
Because this is all rhetorical.
Right.
In the second this stuff is in practice. Now, I mean, I told a story on the podcast, the Fifth Column podcast the other day, about a dress that I bought for somebody for a gift. And I didn't know it shipped from France. And now we have a 50% tariff.
Oh, yeah.
And in between the time I ordered it,
Yeah.
it came, and I got a bill from DHL for $250, like pay the tariff.
Yeah.
And if you don't, we send it back. And it's like, well, I guess it's getting a free ride back to France.
Yeah.
And I realized that it wasn't even just 50% because there was whatever the tariff was on it.
Yeah,
so it was like 58% tariff on this thing. And that happened in a moment.
Right.
And this is going to happen. There's a great moment on Capitol Hill today where the completely ridiculous Howard Lutnick was being grilled by
Mr. Tiny Screws. That's like he's the one he was crowing a couple weeks ago after, I was going to call it Judgment Day, Liberation Day. On his media tour after that, he was like, what's great is that we're bringing back those jobs to America where Americans will be doing tiny little screws on iPhones.
Did he actually? He didn't actually say that.
Yeah, he did. He was like,
No, that's the part you lie about.
Proud about like we're going to have a whole generation of people now doing like tiny little screws. And it's like, that's a vision to make America great again. It's amazing.
Well, he was on, was being, questioned by this woman on the Hill. And she said, bananas, tariff. And he says, 8%, 9%. And she said, well, bananas at Walmart have already gone up 6 or 7%. And then he goes off on this jag about, we're just going to try to make it all come back. And she's like, we can't make bananas in America. And he's completely caught flat-footed and just
I'm
moves on.
amazed that he didn't be like, bananas are a left-wing fruit. I mean, we have good American apples and cherries. What do we need apples?
I mean, what did you think? What was the, I don't know if it struck you as it struck me, when Donald Trump was going on this long jag about how many toys kids need.
Yeah, that I like.
Because you remember that Bernie Sanders,
about
toothpaste,
deodorants and sneakers.
Do we need this many
I
varieties of
tweeted
sneakers?
and I think I wrote something about that because that was stunning. Where years ago, Sanders had said like, why do you need? And it was great because he said something like 23 flavors of deodorant.
Yeah.
Like, or
clearly a man who's not
different
wearing
types
it.
of sneakers.
Yeah.
Well, he uses pumice stone, I'm sure, or healing crystals. But it was just kind of like, this is Trump saying exactly the same thing, right? The analogous thing. And now, but to go back to this question about the libertarian moment, because, the short answer of why didn't the libertarian moment happen after that New York Times Magazine story, although that perfectly proved that whenever the New York Times writes about a trend, it's already dead. But the short answer is on a profound level, what Matt and I wrote about in the libertarian moment was the idea that mass personalization was taking place across every element of your life. And that, I think, has
Which is absolutely true.
And has continued to proceed apace. Politically, it did not. Like the idea that, okay, people would start voting for less government, lower taxes, and actually lower spending so they could kind of have more money and space and time to create their own personal reality. That did not happen. But I think this is where the stuff you're talking about, it it's going to wake a lot of people up.
But to stay on that for a second, why do you think there's such a disconnect between that sort of acknowledgement and living with that kind of personalization and the politics that it produces? I mean, we have iPhones, and I take pictures of things in my house, like wiring, and I use ChatGPT, and they're like, "Oh, this wire here, this wire," and it's like now I've gotten used to it, and it's so amazing. And we don't think ever of where this comes from and why it has happened.
If I can use a very base level of like how we recuperate progress immediately into the status quo and then dismiss it.
Yeah.
But a couple of weeks ago, I had a discomfort on the arch of my right foot, and I was like, oh, maybe I have a blister, and it was a wart, which I hadn't had in years.
I don't like where this is going, but go
ahead. Well, it's it's below the waist, so it's like, or below the knees. Let's put it that way. But I went to CVS and I bought a compound W thing that costs like $6, and it frees the wart and it's gone. And I can remember my sister, this would have been in the 70s or early 80s, having to go to the hospital to get a wart removed on her foot, and then was on crutches for a while. And there's a million instances of that. I used Google Navigator to get here, and then I rode a city bike part of the way. And it's like this was unimaginable 20 years ago.
Look, I mean, I'm alive because of it. I mean, if you see these things on, those of you listening to this on a podcast, I have a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor. My father died at the age of 63 as a result of his type 1 diabetes, which he was diagnosed with, I think, in 1952, where you couldn't test your blood sugar. If you want to test your blood sugar in the traditional way, you go to Walmart, and I think you can get the whole kit now for like $7. And, I have an insulin pump now. I mean, the technology, I throw the insulin pump away after 3 days. You have to move it because of irritation and things like that. And you take it off, and the sticker kind of comes off, and you realize there's a little like motherboard on it that you're just tossing out after 3 days. And there's a way of thinking about that as like, oh, this is so wasteful. Look at all the plastic. But I see this as I cannot believe how much easier my life is now than my father's was having the same disease. And you can ask someone the most boring, simple question: what time in human history would you want to live? And if the answer is not now, you're thinking about it in the wrong way.
But, this gets to the point. I sometimes think about this moment as the agony of abundance. And the fact is when you look at material reality, and I think I have the facts to back this up. People are doing better. Nobody is starving, certainly in America, but increasingly in the world, where this demographer at Brookings, Homi Karas, talks about how since about 2017, more than 50% of people on the globe are living at a middle class or above standard, meaning that they have disposable income after they're, wherever they are, they're paying their basic needs. And that is amazing. Like, we talk a lot about the decline in extreme poverty, which is very important and great, but the idea that most people on the planet are middle class for the first time in human history is amazing. And it's...
If that means you're a globalist, then fine.
But it means, but nobody talks about that kind of stuff.
All right. We don't know what happened there. Do we know what happened there?
I should be wearing an iPad. I don't know.
The power went out, I think. Is that what happened? It's like we're in Caracas. The power went out. But we're back now, and we will stop our conversation that we're having about Mission Impossible 3, which you haven't seen, right?
No, please, no spoilers. And it's not Mission Impossible 3. It's like Mission Impossible 30.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like 48, but I don't understand the plots of them anyway. But one of them, Wolf Blitzer, was in. But anyway, let's get...
He's the bad guy, right?
Well, he's the guy's wearing a Wolf Blitzer mask. Like, talk about a fucking horror movie.
I went to Halloween as Wolf Blitzer for, I don't know, like 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then he sent you that cease and desist.
That was... I didn't expect that from him. This used to be a free country.
Let's get back to the Libertarian Moment now that we have power back.
Unfortunately, the Libertarian Moment fully happened.
It did.
We were off there. So.
It's about a 20-minute moment.
It was a beautiful thing, man.
Wait, did it even have 20 minutes?
I can't even, describe it.
Wait, was there a moment? Like,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it
well,
actually like you were
yeah.
predicting one, but did
Right.
one kind of happen
Well,
for a moment?
yeah, I mean, it's a infelicitous term, to be quite honest, but the whole, for me, like basically, at least since the early 70s, this has been happening, the idea of mass personalization of experience.
Yeah.
And having more freedom, which is embedded in economic freedom and cultural freedom and technological freedom, but to kind of do what you want, or to live the way that you want, and to dress the way that you want, and work the way that you want. Like, we're much more likely to be able to put together the life that we want.
Is there not an argument to be made? And I imagine that, if you have the guy who's running for mayor of New York, don't mess with the Zohan or whatever.
Yeah.
The DSA guy.
Red Pete or whatever.
Yeah. I'm sure that he would say, well, all of those cultural things are because of liberalism. That's, we on the left fought for all those individual liberties, and maybe libertarians were kind of in the background, but don't take credit for it.
One of the things that they miss, and this is why it's important to think about it in terms of economics as well as and technology, the left was not like, oh, what would be great is deregulating things. And it's true that people like Ted Kennedy and people like Ralph Nader were heavily involved in airline and trucking deregulation, but they don't even believe in it, or Ted Kennedy doesn't believe in much these days. But Ralph Nader has pushed away from all of that, and they didn't like free trade. They didn't like globalization. The left didn't like that. The left was not, what the internet is going to set us free. They were, the hard left were against anything that made it easier to have free speech, so.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote something for Airmail recently on the anniversary of the battle in Seattle.
Yeah,
and if you go back, it's like a Trump rally in a lot of ways. I mean, there was half of it was about turtles. There were people dressed up as turtles and all that stuff.
And then throwing things through Starbucks and McDonald's.
Correct. So they were setting Starbucks on fire and everything.
Yeah.
And by the way, the funny thing about this, and I included in the piece, is that there are two people that were in the No to the WTO band that was Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys was a singer, and Chris Novoselic,
the bassist,
and then Kim Thayer, who was a guitar player in Soundgarden. And their interview, I found this totally bizarre interview, digging and digging. And when I was trying to check the quote, I couldn't find it again, but I ultimately did, where contemporaneously, they were like, there's some like pretty great things about globalization too.
Yeah, no, well, I know Chris Novoselic, who I've interviewed a couple times, he said
bass player for Nirvana. For people who don't know.
When they started, breaking stuff up, he was like, no, this isn't good. And he's a fascinating character. The politics of the cultural left was not necessarily at one, with perfect identity with the WTO protesters, for sure.
But do you think that, to get back to this, was kind of a thing that I'm kind of obsessed with is that, we're always talking about how, the Republican Party at least would pay lip service to libertarian ideals or to, spending and blah, blah, blah. They never did it, but they talked about it. Right. And that's kind of how you got elected in a lot of ways. And now the opposite is true. But when I talk about that and people talk about that, I do wonder if there is something around the corner when the effects of this stuff is all felt.
Yeah, and I think, part of it is that what Trump has done, Trump is important, and he's reflecting, something real in the country at least over the past decade since he's, been in national politics. And what he is not offering, he's offering a right-wing politics of grievance that kind of matches or mirrors the left-wing politics of grievance. What neither the left-wing version or the right-wing version does is really posit a future. This is like, the ship is going down, and we are kicking off, we're saving the lifeboats for our people. And I think what, as Trump and kind of Bernie Sanders or, right and left-wing populism gets closer and closer, that is going to be the moment when a real alternative will emerge. If I may, somebody who I know from your Little League days, Morris Fiorina,
an old Little League coach of mine.
He said that you were one of the worst players that he ever coached, and that you
I was the
wouldn't
Bucky
wear your
Dent.
hat backwards. The Jerry Remy. I'm assuming you were either a second baseman or a shortstop.
I was a second baseman. Rest in peace, Remy.
Yeah, so because you had like the chicken arm. Right? But no, he has talked a lot over really over the past 25 years about how there are broad supermajorities for a lot of things in America, including things like, generally speaking, immigration, pot legalization, gay marriage, kind of economic liberalism. But they can't be expressed in either of the two parties because they've been captured by more extreme versions. And he said, in the 21st century, we've seen the White House and the different houses of Congress go, from conservative Republican to Democrat, back to Republican to split, et cetera, like in a way that we had not seen since the late 19th and early 20th century, an era that's called the period of no decision, and we're in a modern one. And he said what ended that first one was when progressivism, which was a much more muscular role of government at the national level especially, became the consensus. And you had, Republicans like Teddy Roosevelt doing that, as well as, people, Woodrow Wilson. And that the new consensus has not emerged yet. So we're going to be, I interviewed him after Trump, I guess, or no, this was when Biden won in 2020, and the title of the interview was something like, "Don't expect this election to settle things for long." And, I think that's true. So we have these, unstable majorities, which is his most recent book, going back and forth. I worry that the new consensus is going to be a populism that blends part of the economics of the left and the cultural repression of the right. This would put us in we'd be in the category of the Republic of Ireland for most of the 20th century, which is the worst place to be. But I think as Trump's policies come online and as lefties start to be like, oh yeah, well, we're kind of in the same boat, when those policies are shown to be a failure, we're going to see a need for an alternative. And I think it is going to be libertarian, not in a partisan sense, but that both Democrats and Republicans, this
in a sort of instinctual sense.
Yeah, like a pre-political thing that like the government needs to be spending less money. It needs to be telling us to, directing us less. I think there's, because if populism is about you're going to do it my way and you're going to be punished and you are going to be given, I'm going to take from this group to give to my group, the response to that will be libertarian, which is let's just make government smaller and less part of our lives.
I mean, it seems that the coalition is not breaking apart at all, but we're seeing some, splitting of seams in places, whether it's from Elon Musk, or other people on the Hill.
I mean, like, the Democratic Party, I mean, nobody kind of wants to talk about it but, the 2024 election and the whole process of what happened, like Biden wanting to run and not, them being squeezed out at the last minute, and Kamala, it was a disaster for the Democratic Party, and there is a real struggle between kind of different factions within the Democratic Party. I think you're going to start seeing this happening in the Republican Party because Trump is effectively already a lame duck president, and then after the midterms, he's fully going to be. And MAGA, Trump scares
So is that
people.
when the coalition, if it comes apart, it starts coming apart for real after the midterms?
I think so, yeah. And this
the pushback,
Elon Musk
though, is
stuff
on,
is interesting.
But the pushback, like the Elon Musk stuff, is on economics. It's not on DEI stuff. It's not on how they're treating universities. There's things that I have, an enormous amount of problems with, like our friends at FIRE. Like, it is specifically on spending. It is specifically on debt. It is specifically on the debt ceiling, just say it doesn't matter at all.
Right.
That's an interesting thing to me, that it's actually, that's where the pushback is coming from. And it's not just Tom Massey, and it's not just Rand Paul. There are, or Don Bacon is my favorite. He always shows up, Don Bacon.
God damn it, Bacon.
God damn it, Bacon, you're off the case. But those...
Oh, and
factions.
Chip
Roy, who is like a very principled guy. And I interviewed him once. He's a smart guy.
If I may, one of the things from a libertarian perspective that worries me is that really, as bad as the economics have been, since like 2015, say, and for all of the 21st century, I mean, government spending and regulations have just been going up and up. That's all bad. But what actually worries me more over the past decade is that more Americans, or it's more of a challenge to say, you know what, like people should be able to live however the fuck they want. And this is partly, after certain kinds of woke excesses, you see, there's an increase. People, I don't think, are as comfortable with cultural difference as they used to be.
An example
And
of
that worries me.
which is interesting. And I only bring this up because it's relevant here, but there was a video of the journalist Glenn Greenwald that was leaked online. And, the less said about that, the better.
Yeah.
But the response, because Glenn has become a huge fan of, like, people, his fan base is like the Tucker Carlson fan.
Yeah. He was
goes
on
on the
Tucker
show
the day before that
The day
leaked.
before that leaked. And the response to that was pretty interesting. You had a lot of people coming out in the Tucker universe saying, I don't care what he does in his private life. He's a great journalist. And as long as he's still doing his great work. And then the fracture started.
Right.
And these guys, like, very popular people like Matt Walsh, not Matt Welch, saying, like, you're disgusting and you shouldn't have kids in your home.
That's right.
And there was a lot of people coming back that way. And it's like, oh, that is still there and very, very, very prominent.
And there's a number of social conservatives who are still kind of sore that homosexualism has been legitimized. And I think that's, there's going to be a play where some of those people, and depending on how they fit into MAGA, are going to be making a push for that. I don't think that will win, but there was.
It doesn't have the broad support.
Yeah, but there, the idea that people, can be more comfortable with, like, the idea of choice in everything. That we have more choices and we're more comfortable with that. I think that's a battle that needs to be constantly refought.
What do you think about, this is a very different administration this time around, different cast of characters, kind of unrestrained. It was a little more restrained before. We had the tariffs before, steel and aluminum, which Bush had done, and Biden kept, and it's just kind of the cadence of politics in America, steel and aluminum stuff, SOP to the unions. This is very different, obviously. The first time around, we got endless books and commentary about fascism, about authoritarianism, about the end of democracy.
Well, all those critics have moved to Canada.
Correct,
so we don't have
right?
to
Jason
listen to them anymore.
Stanley and Tim Snyder and his wife.
And they publish in Canadian, so we don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know how to read it.
I don't know what they're saying anymore. They're just talking about hosers and Tim Hortons.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no Tim Hortons and fascism.
Yeah.
But you see that stuff, right? And now you have an administration that's attacking law firms, that it's doing kind of crazy stuff, sort of Stephen Miller stuff.
And the FTC and the FCC are going after social media platforms.
Going after CBS for, a $10 billion lawsuit that Donald Trump filed about an interview that he wasn't involved in.
Right.
And he won the election.
Yeah, no, it's very funny.
It makes no sense.
But he has, it caused him a lot of discomfort, and I think he was, at some point they were going to settle, and he's like, no, I want $20 million.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah, when he did actually in the suit, I think say he was like unnerved by it and he couldn't sleep or something.
Yeah.
But this is back.
Right.
How serious should we take it?
Yeah.
There are elements that I'm just like, that is really terrible.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who were fighting for free speech, quote unquote, who have disappeared. You can't find them anymore because they don't really mind this kind of attack on speech.
it's deeply disturbing in the same way that, the Russiagate narrative that couldn't die during Trump's first term, which was baseless and was proven wrong by, a variety of independent investigations, and it wouldn't be dropped. And I feel like there's a lot of people in the Trump camp now who are like, and this is the problem, like, they don't want to get to a synthesis or like a new place. They don't want to reboot. They just want revenge. So they're like, this is how you have to do it. And, David Horowitz, who I think we both knew, who died recently, he was the modern kind of lefty turned righty who was like, you have to fight fire with fire. And, if he has a kind of spiritual son, it's Chris Rufo. And it isn't about getting to a place where it's like, okay, all the bloodshed is over, and now, at the end of the Planet of the Apes, the first 5 movies, it takes place in a world where the apes and the humans are getting along, and there's like a Dr. Zaius's grandson is teaching an outdoor classroom about tolerance. Like that, nobody's interested in that world,
But it's like his grandson?
It's something
Yeah,
like that because
yeah.
it's in the future, and it's like, and the orangutans, have taken it down a notch. Like they're not so snooty anymore.
But that's the thing about these guys when you push it and
Yeah.
you say, well, you cared about free speech.
No, and you really
But the response, I mean, I'll give them credit for being honest about it. In the responses, this is the tactics that allowed them to win.
Right.
And now we've turned the corner and we're winning and we're going to use the exact same
Why would you give up? I mean, I will confess to not only have I never read Lord of the Rings, but I don't think I could finish the movies.
No, I watched one.
And but the whole thing about the Ring of Power, like once you get the power, it's like, oh, it's like, you know what, like this is kind of good looking, and I'll wield it because I deserve it.
But you're used to that as a libertarian, people from both parties coming to sleep with you.
Yeah.
But then not calling you when they, it's like you're like
I don't think it's consensual. I want ideological consent, consent on that and everything. But
no, it's like
there's
the commonalities that people come, and then you're like, but you're used to this at this point.
And it's also,
they're not like us. They actually don't give a shit about these things.
It's interesting to see too how like some of the weird, kind of swapping, in this. So you have somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In the Trump administration. He's a lifelong Democrat and like a progressive Democrat, who is now in Trump running Trump's HHS, which might legalize psychedelics. And to me, this is the world we live in, where Trump, who is the squarest, like whatever the opposite of psychedelics, that's Trump. And he might be the guy who is like, okay, go, let's crank up domestic production of LSD again.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, there's some other things that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is doing that are a little unnerving. Right?
No, totally. Or like the fixation on getting rid of, red and yellow dye.
Yeah, which apparently is going to happen. I mean,
he's announced, it's kind of vague. He announced an understanding with, Captain Crunch. He made Captain Crunch walk the plank. And our Skittles will all be gray.
But you don't think it's going to be, we're on the precipice of, I mean, look, if you watch certain TV channels, if you read certain Twitter feeds, et cetera, you'd be pretty scared, right?
Yeah, I mean, that when I walk out of this studio, there's going to be Zeppelins with spotlights slowly moving across the sky. And
do we have the clip? This is a clip I pulled for your enjoyment because I came across this today, and it's Christiane Amanpour.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Who is married to? She's talking to her husband,
somebody who was in the Obama or Clinton administration. Yeah. And are they they're in a bunker that Alex Jones let the lease go once Trump won a second term or something?
She got the domain name in the bunker. But this is her talking to her husband. I came across this today, and she is Iranian by birth, grew up in Britain, very good circumstances and very good circumstances now, and she was coming to America and to do something in Boston.
It's worrying that Cuba is probably getting crowded. It's the last free place on Earth.
But this is what she said to her husband. I don't even know where this is broadcast, but I saw it online of her talking about.
I really hope this isn't the Glenn Greenwald video.
This is her coming into the country and how she felt.
When I went to Harvard to give this speech, and it was just a few days ago, last week, I must say I was afraid.
No deficit?
I'm a foreigner. I don't
have
have a green card. I'm not an American citizen. I'm fairly prominent. And I literally prepared to go to America as if I was going to North Korea. I took a burner phone, Jamie. Imagine that. I didn't take a single, not my mobile phone, not my iPad, nothing. And I had nothing on the burner phone except a few numbers, and I could text with my assistant. I had your number. I had our son's number. I had our lawyer's number, the CNN lawyer. And I was really afraid. I'd even talked to the CNN security person because of this. I've heard that many, including British citizens, have been stopped at the border and questioned for hours and hours and hours. And I know that a lot of them from anecdotal discussions with my friends, have been turned around. Even parents who were coming to various universities for their kids' graduations, whether they're from any part of the world. So it was scary. Luckily, Jamie, I was welcomed. I mean, the immigration officer at Boston, where I came in, could not have been nicer. Obviously, none of this was discussed. Thanked me for what I do, bringing the stories of the world to America and to viewers and listeners, etc. So, huge sigh of relief I breathed. But wow, I mean, can you imagine if I'm afraid? What do others think?
Yeah, the first takeaway from that is Jamie wants a divorce. It's like he didn't say a word.
He was blinking like a POW in Vietnam. He was to the State Department. Yeah.
But I do like that at the end she was like,
yeah.
my award-winning journalism that he thanked me for. But she got
that TSA guy. You know, was like, may I carry your bags, Miss Amanpour?
That stuff. North Korea. And by the way, this is what we used to call fake news. I tried to find this, that there were massive numbers of British people being turned away at the border for no apparent reason. And I came up with a story of the band, the UK Subs. You remember the UK Subs? Yeah. And the singer got in, but the other ones didn't. Right. And they said it was because they had the wrong work permits. But the other guy was like, but I don't like Donald Trump, but it's probably that. And it's like, I probably the work permit.
Yeah, the
is
Kinks
what it was.
had, the Kinks never made it as big as they would have in America because they had trouble with unions.
That's right.
Back in the 60s. Let me say.
And ultimately, Ray Davies got shot in New Orleans. So what does that tell you?
Was he shot or stabbed?
I think he was shot. Okay. We can have a fact check on that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. A lot weighs on that. And in any case, we know that Dave Davies was behind it.
Not the unions. But is this like North Korea?
This
is why no one trusts the media.
That is nuts, and that is kind of like, I feel like I need a wet nap after watching that performance. It's just gross because it's so self-important. There have been some researchers who have been stopped
one
and
from
turned
France
away
and
and what worries me, I mean, I find the thing beyond tariffs, and actually it's in front of tariffs, that I hate most about Trump, and especially in this administration, is his immigration policy. Because this, to me, it is just a sign of total weakness and insecurity when you're like, we're the greatest country in the world, and so we have to stop people from coming here. Like, there's just something wrong with that. But I do worry about the number of people who are being deported because Tom Homan and the people at ICE and stuff, they can't get the numbers they want by actually going after criminals because most of them are either in prison or they've already been sent home. So you start going after anybody you can find. And those stories are starting to add up. And if they do mass deportations of, people who are living here and working here, like that's messed up. But I am not
are going down too.
Yeah, well, it's hard.
It's a popular policy, and now it's become less popular, particularly with the El Salvador stuff.
Yeah, and this happened, the idea that you would start deporting Venezuelans fleeing socialism and sending them to El Salvador, it just doesn't seem right. And also, Marco Rubio bothers me in this because he knows firsthand his parents were Cuban refugees. And it's like, refugees from socialism, like those are probably people you want in the country, especially if you want to keep capitalism going and stuff like that.
And Cuba is now on this expanded list of countries, which you're not. I don't even know, like you're not permitted entry or something, but that's a long way from the wet foot, dry foot policy.
Yeah, and it's
if you got here, you were allowed to stay here.
Well, and this is why I think there's a serious, what's going on partly on a broad level in America is a lack of confidence in our ability to kind of get on with our lives. And I don't think individuals, I think, this is at elite levels and deeply disturbing. So I worry very much about Trump's immigration policies, which I think are wrong and stupid and reflect a declinist point of view. But I don't think we're turning into North Korea.
What about the courts?
Well, what's great about the courts, I think, and it's a bunch of Trump people. This happened the first time around, but it's like, the system is working to restrain overreach by the executive branch. Stephen Miller and other people will talk about how dare a judge disagree with Trump because Trump is all powerful. Trump is Dr. Zayas, and I would love to see him in the Dr. Zayas outfit. Yeah. Well, Yeah, Barrett.
Well, he was the one who
Barrett
cared
will be the one. Yeah. Dr. Zayas was kind of a hierarchical, Nazi. But and obviously, I need to stop thinking about Dr. Zayas so much. And if if RFK Jr. opens up the FDA, maybe those drugs will be approved more quickly. Having said all of that, Trump is bad. He's doing a lot of bad things, but I don't think this. The candles aren't going out all over America.
Is there anything hopeful? I mean, to talk about the bad things that the administration has done. I mean, they've done so much. I mean, obviously, I'm going to assume, I know, that you don't like this all being done by executive fiat and tariffs.
And he's kind of put that up on steroids, but this is nothing new. I mean, and this is something. I mean, when you were at Reason, we were already well into decades of talking about how Congress needs to be
in the imperial presidency.
Yeah, and that Congress needs to actually do its job. Congress can restrain the president, through all sorts of reasons, but they don't.
You have to give Trump the mafioso credit for the fact that Congress doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about somebody who's, libertarian adjacent, one-term Congressman Peter Meyer, who, told me back then that, everyone says horrible things about Trump behind closed doors, but nobody dares cross him publicly.
Yeah.
And I mean, to your point about him becoming a lame duck after the midterms, I actually wonder. I mean, because you don't want to piss off J.D. Vance. I mean, Paul Castellano might be dead, but you don't want to fuck with John Gotti, right?
Yeah, and I totally see that. I think we'll know, over the next few months. But like, J.D. Vance wants to be he wants to be John Gotti, but I don't know if he can pull it off. And there's going to be a lot of people jockeying for that position. Some things that Trump is doing that I think are good, like his AI policy is good. Like he took the guardrails off of a lot of AI type stuff. I think some of the DEI stuff is good. I think, Doge directionally or conceptually was right. And it started a conversation, however kind of fucked up it got. It started a conversation that would not have been happening.
But do people associate that conversation now with like flim-flammery? Because
that is. It's really kind of like it's vaporware. It was classic Silicon Valley vaporware. We're going to cut $2 trillion from the budget. $1 trillion. We're going to say we cut $150 billion, and that's probably not right. And our website doesn't actually prove anything. So I mean that worries me. But Trump has done some things, that are right. The guy that he put in at the head of the SEC is really good. So that's good, because one of the things is, and I worry about this in kind of the journalistic classes, that because Trump is back, and everybody in the media wanted Trump to win because he's a better story. But Biden was really terrible, and he was, an overregulator, and he was an overspender. And now the question is, Trump, we need to hold Trump accountable, but Trump is not he's not Stalin, I guess. Is
it in the kind of nature of somebody who is a libertarian or libertarian adjacent to be optimistic about things, in the sense that there are very few people in political parties, because it doesn't sell tickets, right? It doesn't put people in the seats, that talk about the positive things that have been happening over the past many hundreds of years. I mean, you talk about global poverty, and it's like, I guess I'm a globalist when I say it is incredible to see poverty like almost eliminated, like extreme poverty in places like Vietnam and China and India, et cetera. You can't help but have a positive outlook. And that just always struck me as, there's a very dark libertarianism that is out there too. And that is, those people who are extreme isolationists.
And also the idea that, what is the thing I can't stand is that people get mad at me when I say I just want to, voluntarily associate with, my close relatives. In a compound somewhere. And it's like, you can do that, but people are going to attack it. But I mean, there is a dark libertarianism. I am always kind of I'm optimistic because I think things have gotten better, and I know things have gotten better in my lifetime. I think things have gotten better in my kids' lifetime even, and they will continue to unless we really fuck it up. And that is always a threat. Mm-hmm. So you got to do that. And then I don't look to politics for my primary sense of purpose or focus or activity. Because it's always, politics is zero sum and it's always going to be ugly. This is where I think if we're on the cusp of a libertarian moment, that is going to appear sometime in the near future, it's going to be what I think is one of the essences of libertarianism, which is that politics, because they are, you have to agree, and like somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. It's a zero-sum game. You want to shrink that down to the smallest part of activity possible, because what's really interesting about life is what you're doing in the other parts of your life. So you want a government that does less and costs less, so that you have more time and more resources to go out and do what you really want to be doing. And I think we're reaching, an endpoint of that, because certainly, this kind of happened under Bush, but then under Obama, there seemed to be more and more political litmus tests on everything. Yeah. With Trump, everything became, it's not totalitarian, but it's kind of totalist, where it's like everything was political. Yeah. And then that maintained itself under Biden. It's back to Trump, and it's exhausting. And most people, one of the things that we know is that people actually they're not ideological in systematic and consistent ways. So it's like, I want lower taxes. So why do I have to be anti-abortion? Yeah. I'm free speech. Why do I have to be pro-union or anti-trade? Mm-hmm. And that's another part of the Declaration of Independence, was that people were debundling their political beliefs, because, the political parties were established before the Civil War. Yeah. These are old, worn-out brands that probably need to,
it's like a
total
cable
remake
package,
or something.
Right?
Yeah, that's one of the metaphors we use. And it's fascinating, because we wrote that in 2011. There's a paperback in 2012, and we could talk about people unbundling their cable package. And now, like, cable is kind of done. Yeah. It's still big, but it's it's a sunset industry. So
let me ask you one more question before we get to a listener viewer question. Some people, including myself, would be surprised to hear you say, considering it is your business, that politics doesn't sort of govern your life. It's not the sort of motivating instinct of your life. You've been doing it for a long time, right? I mean, you work at a political magazine. You've been at the same place for long. You started off as a music journalist.
Is my therapist on the line?
Yeah.
That'll be the
that's
question
what's coming.
line,
This is the surprise.
Yeah.
Don't ruin the surprise. Well, but at the end of this, when you come to this point, I guess what your co-author Matt Welch would call the French goodbye, which is the endlessly complicated question, as the final question. What's the takeaway? I mean, when you've been doing this for so long, I mean, I have my takeaways about how you can't move the needle on certain things. About, you come into this with some kind of hope. I mean, all these people that come out of school, green but aspirational, and they want to change the world. What have you walked away from political journalism thinking in the big way, like the one sort of big takeaway?
Well, I mean, I'll give you two, since we're doing a French goodbye. And one is that progress has been made. Like, overall, I think material progress is everywhere around us, but so is moral progress. Like, just, if we say I started Reason in '93, we're a better country. We're less, we're less racist, less homophobic. We're, more generous. I think we're more thoughtful. When it comes to things like drug legalization, we're putting fewer people away for using, certain plants or substances that were arbitrarily classified as illegal or illicit, as the government calls it. There's a lot of, progress, like moral progress. So I think that's worth thinking about. And then when I look at the technological innovation that has made our lives so much more interesting, and we live longer. We could, I would love to talk. It's too long and complicated to talk about why the deaths of despair narrative is wrong anyway. But generally speaking, we're living longer, richer lives, and we need to figure out how to become happy or how to actualize more. But The fact is everybody has more options than they used to, and I see that as a huge thing. On the kind of libertarian sensibilities of things, I'm glad that we are a less interventionist country than we used to be, and that's something that libertarians, were, I think, broadly right on. I mean, it can be, if you're a super isolationist, which somehow then means that you also praise Putin. That's like kind of crazy.
Yeah, with some people there.
But I think we're more understanding of the limits of America to kind of terraform the world in our image, whatever that means. We're talking about things like zoning and housing regulations and occupational licensing in ways that are genuinely libertarian. And I think, more people are like, let people live how they want, and let's start getting, things like school choice coming out all over the place. So like there have actually been, on a policy level, there have been a lot of libertarian victories over the past 30 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have the debates within the Democratic Party and one of the direction of the party, and one of the big ones is from a group of people who, I don't know if they call themselves this, but they are called abundance Democrats, which is, an amazing thing. I mean, it's a positive thing.
They could have read about that 20 years ago. Yeah. Reason.
I think Ezra Klein's, some of the things that he said, particularly about housing and building houses and regulation, is something. Right. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I'm interested in this, because I read this stuff and I say, there's an echo of something from a decade ago, well, from many decades, but from my experience, that I just assumed would kind of wither away. But it hasn't. It's become part of the debate. All right, we're going to take a question for Nick Gillespie now. Okay. We have Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
How's it going, guys?
Okay.
There you go. I got you. How's it going, buddy?
Can you hear me? Okay, now you can hear me. Okay. Hey, Nick, I was thinking about all the great interviews you've done over the years. And, of course, that one with Nick Cave that you did last year was
one of my favorites. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that was really good. But something kind of relating to the topic at hand, you had a really good interview with Penn Jillette, who kind of came to, an identity crisis. He was a big, proponent of libertarian for libertarians. And then during the pandemic, he kind of
big
seems
denouncer,
like big denouncer. He wanted, I think he was wanted mandates. I think vaccine mandates, or he's concerned about people not concerned about the greater good. And you're talking about the libertarian moment. It's like those types of crisis and confidence. Yeah, it was kind of me, but that was the one that stood out to me. I was just wondering about some memorable interviews you've had that stood out to you.
Do you want to quickly address that? Thank you so much, because it's a really good question. Because I felt a certain measure of despair when I heard Penn, and you had a respectful interview, and you've known him for a long time, and I think he's brilliant.
Oh, and he was like really hardcore libertarian.
Hardcore.
And, he less so. I don't know if, I think he kind of rejected the term as a descriptor. But the way he talked about it, and we talked about it in the interview, he said that part of it was that there was a libertarian group in Vegas who kind of assumed and commanded him to lead their lockdown mandate. And he, did not appreciate that, and he disagreed about a bunch of COVID protocols. So,
and a trans child too, I think, was some effect of that. I think I remember.
Yeah,
I could be wrong about that. I don't want to say. Yeah, I think there was something like that. But
he also really dislikes Donald Trump, who he knows personally.
Yes,
from being
he was fired from The Apprentice, right?
Yeah.
And so he has a personal animus because he got kicked off of a game show.
And it was more, and to his credit, he says, it's the way Donald Trump acts. So I respect that. I don't think, I don't have like a real litmus test, but, so I still see Penn and Teller in a way. Like to me, they're great culture heroes because they made America weird in a fantastic way in the 80s. And then, or I guess I started watching them in the 80s.
He didn't disown the show that they did bullshit.
No, not at all. No. And it's, and I was thinking, I know you at some point have talked about the Pee Wee Herman documentary. Like Pee Wee Herman's another character from that era who, Paul Rubens was not political, really. I don't think it was libertarian, but like those characters who just made something possible that wasn't possible before. They're kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, as a measure of progress, when you get into the Pee Wee Herman documentary where he gets arrested, the first thing that everybody thinks is that just wouldn't happen now.
Right.
Not only because we don't have like porn theaters, but it just people wouldn't be as horrified by. And I was talking to somebody about this today. Is that there are like I'll see an actress on a movie and I look her up on IMDb, and then at some point you come across like the fappening. Like, nobody even knows. Like it's not even a thing anymore. Well, somebody leaked a photo of you. It's like not the biggest deal in the world. It's terrible invasion of privacy. But we've changed enormously in a short period of time.
We've just grown up, so much where it's like, okay, that that just doesn't really matter. If I may, one of my favorite interview. One of them, and as Andy was talking, I was thinking I had the opportunity through the Free State Project in New Hampshire to interview Edward Snowden via Skype in, when he was in Russia. And I think this would have been 2000. Yeah, it was 2016 because, and he said, and this was fascinating to be talking to a guy who I consider a real hero and a martyr, and I think he's a smart thinker, all of that kind of stuff. And he said, that the individual has more ability to kind of affect their life than at any other time in human history. And it's like kind of amazing to have a guy who is stuck, in Russia and still is saying that. And then I also asked him if he had received his absentee ballot and who he was voting for. And he didn't tell us who he was voting for. But that was also interesting because both Trump and Hillary Clinton were like, oh, he's a traitor who should be shot.
And another sign of people changing their minds and progress. And it's something that I hope we get into the show if we can get Sam Tannenhouse on here to talk about the transformation of Bill Buckley, which is, from some very horrible ideas to changing his mind. Our mutual friend, Jamie Kirchick, who wrote an editorial for the New York, opinion piece for the New York Times about, Julian Assange and saying, I've attacked this guy for years and it's time to stop this war on him. And it was interesting to see that like a lot of those stories have changed. The kind of culture's changed, and so the stories have changed. Nick Gillespie, the Reason interview with Nick Gillespie, go watch it. Please come back. One of my favorite people, smartest guy out there. And thank you guys for joining us. And make sure you're subscribed to us here on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. And be sure to tune in on Tuesday, June 10th, when we'll be joined by TrueAnon's Brace Belden. Look him up, a very, very popular lefty podcast. So join us then, and we will see you on Tuesday.